Happy with her plan, Adaeze went back to her mother for help. Her mother gladly agreed and took her to the kingdom's dibia. The dibia was an old herbalist whom the king rarely summoned to the palace, so he was shocked to see a member of the royal family in his shrine. However, he welcomed Adaeze like a healer greeting a patient. Adaeze requested a spell to enchant Ugochi. She wanted Ugochi to kill her mother the night before the king stepped down and announced his new heir. The dibia agreed and asked for a knife needed to complete the ritual. He then chanted incantations over it. Satisfied, he assured Adaeze that Ugochi's hatred for Ijeoma would slowly intensify. By the night before the coronation, he promised Ugochi would take Adaeze's knife and kill Ijeoma in her sleep. Adaeze signed with relief, smiling wickedly. Back in the palace, Ijeoma felt uneasy for days. Every attempt to speak to Ugochi was met with coldness. Ugochi snubbed her in the courtyard and nearly pushed her to the ground when she tried to get close. The king noticed this growing hatred and decided to speak to his daughter. But the spell on Ugochi was too strong. She could not hear any of his words. One of Ijeoma's servants observed how terribly Ugochi treated Ijeoma and felt deeply guilty knowing the truth. She clearly remembered handing the poisoned water to Ijeoma before she sent it back to Adaeze. Unsure of what to do, she approached Ugochi one afternoon, hoping to tell her the whole truth about her birth. But before she could speak, Adaeze's mother intervened and threw the servant out. Ugochi watched in confusion as Adaeze joined them, demanding to know what had happened. Her mother quickly lied, saying the servant had tried to manipulate Ugochi and should not be trusted. The day before the coronation, Ugochi felt terribly ill. Ijeoma insisted on staying by her side. Adaeze agreed but suggested they stay in her room instead, where the knife was kept. Ijeoma, oblivious to the danger, was overjoyed at the opportunity to care for Ugochi. She sat beside the young woman, stroking her hair and singing softly. Meanwhile, the servant overheard Adaeze and her mother discussing Ijeoma's fate. Her eyes welled with tears. She realized Adaeze did not know the full truth. As soon as Adaeze's mother left, the servant rushed to Adaeze to confess everything, but Adaeze's mother spotted them from a distance and ordered the servant to leave. This sparked Adaeze's suspicion. As midnight approached, Adaeze sat patiently on her mother's bed, tapping her feet. By midnight, the deed would be done and her son would be crowned king. A sudden knock on the door startled her. Thinking it was her mother, she hurried to open it, but it was not her mother. It was the servant sobbing uncontrollably. Adaeze frowned. What is it? Why have you been acting strange all day? The servant took a deep breath and between sobs confessed the truth. Adaeze's mother had killed her first child. Adaeze's eyes widened in shock. Her lips parted but no words came out. Slowly she turned to face her mother who had just arrived. A mix of rage and disbelief consumed her. Without hesitation, she shoved her frail mother to the floor before locking herself and the servant inside the room. Tears streamed down her face and then a terrifying thought struck her. Ijeoma. Oh God, what have I done? Panic surged through her. She bolted from the room and ran towards her own chamber. Frantically, she pounded on the door, screaming for them to open up. Inside, Ijeoma lay fast asleep, unaware of the impending danger. The clock struck midnight. Ugochi's eyes snapped open. Her expression was blank as she slowly turned to look at the knife beside her. Outside, Adaeze slammed herself against the door, trying to break it down. Her mother grabbed her by the arm and slapped her hard across the face. What the hell do you think you are doing? Adaeze ignored her and threw herself at the door again. This time it busted open with a loud bang. What she saw next made her heart drop. Ugochi was on top of Ijeoma, knife raised high, ready to strike. Adaeze let out a blood-curdling scream and lunged at Ugochi, shoving her off Ijeoma. In the struggle, Ugochi's blade sliced Adaeze's palm. Adaeze cried out in pain. Ijeoma, now fully awake, sat up in shock. She looked at Ugochi, her daughter, who stood before her like a possessed being. Ugochi lunged again, knife in hand. Adaeze grabbed her by the waist, tears streaming down her face. Please stop, she's your mother! Ijeoma gasped. But Ugochi did not hear a word. Adaeze's mother, furious at her daughter's interference, pulled at Ugochi's arm. Let her go! Our blood must be king, not these people. But Adaeze refused to let go. Their screams and struggles attracted the bodyguards, who rushed in to witness the chaos. Foiled by the spell, Ugochi stomped on Adaize's foot. Adaize cried out and released her grip. Ugochi spun around, her knife poised for the fatal blow. But at the last moment, she turned and plunged the blade into Adaize's mother's chest. The room fell silent. Adaize's mother collapsed to the floor, lifeless. Ugochi fainted beside her. Everyone watched in stunned silence. Adaize, still clutching her bleeding hand, stood frozen. She didn't know whether to grieve or feel relieved that her mother had finally paid for her sins. The kingdom soon heard of Adaize and her mother's evil skin. As punishment, Adaize was banished without Ozo. The people rejoiced in the queen's survival, but one question haunted them all. Why didn't Ugochi kill her mother that night?